All right, everybody. Good evening to you all. Go ahead and open your Bibles to John 1, verse 40. John 1, 40. We're in the middle of where we left off, so there's really no need for too much introduction and setup because it's right where we left off with John the prophet, John the baptizer. In the middle of his ministry, Jesus comes and he identifies Jesus to the crowd, specifically to these Levites and men of Jerusalem's leadership who were curious about Jesus and curious about John and who he was and whether he was the Messiah or not. And John says, "I'm not the Messiah, but here he is." And here's Jesus onto the scene. And then right around that same time, well, as we open up, as John is speaking, verse number 40, one of the two which heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. Well, that identifies one of the two, but the writer doesn't tell us who the other one of the two is. Probably because the other one is John. Peter and John, Peter, James, and John, those three. Sometimes Peter, Andrew, James, and John, those four. But those were, of the 12 that Jesus had, those were the closest to Jesus. Especially Peter, James, and John. Those three were almost always with Jesus. Sometimes Andrew was with him, but usually those three. But John doesn't mention that. In fact, nowhere in the entire book of John does John mention John. He mentions John the prophet, John the baptizer, but not the apostle John himself, the author of the book. Nowhere in the text is that given. You know he is one of them because of the other books, but here he's just not referenced. Occasionally you'll get vague references to the disciple whom Jesus loved, or that other disciple, or the disciple whom he loved, things like that. That sounds like a boast, but really it's just a way of keeping his name out of the record, so it really is just an expression of humility. John would never say he was the one and only one that Jesus loved. His entire ministry toward the end of his life was, little children, God loves you, love everyone else. So his way of saying, and then there was that other guy, I'm not going to say his name, that Jesus loves. Well, if he was talking about someone else, he would also describe you as someone whom Jesus loves. He's just not including his name out of humility. So that's just John for you. So John is not the subject here, though. The other disciple is the subject. You have John the baptizer calling out Jesus as the Messiah. He is the one that everyone's been waiting on. And now it says one of those who heard him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He, Andrew, found his brother Simon, verse 41, and said to him, "We have found thee." My old King James says Messias. Yours probably says Messiah. Maybe yours more modern translation says Christ. Mishiach is the Hebrew word. Christ, or Christos, or something like that. Yeah, Christos is the Greek word. Anointed is the English word, although the word Christ has become so synonymous and so characterized by Jesus, even though it was never meant to be this specific title just to Jesus. I'll get back to that in just a second. But it's become so ubiquitous for Jesus that we've basically turned it into his last name when we shouldn't have. His last name is not Christ. He didn't have a last name. There were no last names until the plague in Europe happened, but that's a whole different thing. It's not the point. Let's stay on topic. So Christ is technically just the Greek version of it, but we've used it so much in English and Latin. It's also the same word basically in Latin too, that it became a de facto English word. We've anglicized it. But the original meaning of the word to translate into English, the word we have is anointed. Jesus is not the only Christ in the Bible. David is the anointed of God. David is the anointed. David is, to use the Greek word, Christ. But David is not the Christ. David was an anointed person. David was a Christ person. But he wasn't Jesus the Christ. He wasn't Jesus Christ the Son of God. He was not David the Son of God. He was David the son of Jesse, the anointed by Nathan the prophet. He was David the son of Jesse, to use their language, Christ, or to use their language, the original language of the Hebrews, Mishiach. But they were not thinking of David as the fulfillment of the prophecy given in Genesis 3 or in Galatians, or in Genesis 12 or in Genesis 22 or in Genesis 28. They didn't appreciate that. I'll have more to say about that at the sermon just before Halloween. I have a whole sermon on David and Goliath, and I'll give you more then. But let's not get off topic. Let's keep rolling ahead. We have found the Messiah, which is being interpreted the Christ. We have found him, Jesus Christ. And he brought him, Andrew brought Peter, Simon, to Jesus. He's not Peter yet. I shouldn't call him that. He's Simon. Simon is his name. His given name by his mama and father was Simon. He brought him to Jesus, and when Jesus beheld him, he said, "You are Simon, the son of John." Jonah is what my Bible says, but it's not Jonah like the Jonah swallowed by the whale, Jonah. This is Jona, which is just the Old English way of a variant of John. His father's name, as we would call it, is John. So you are Simon, son of John. That's who you are. That's who you have been. With all of your personality quirks, with all of your flaws and foibles, with all of your untapped potential, you, this fisherman, are just Simon, son of John. But you shall be called, my Bible says, Cephas. Is that what your Bible says? C-E-P-H-A-S? Which is by interpretation. Jesus isn't saying this part. He just says Cephas, period. The writer jumps in and says Cephas, if you don't know, by interpretation means a stone. Cephas is a Chaldean word that means stone. The Greek word for stone is petros, which word basically would mean brick. One brick, not the whole building of bricks, but a brick, one which is used to create a building, a brick, a petros, a Cephas. So Jesus is saying to Peter, here you are, you have been just Simon the son of John, and if you and I had never met, you would have continued being just Simon, son of John, and you would have been a fisherman, and maybe a good fisherman, and you have lived your whole life being a fisherman. No shame in that. No disrespect to fishermen. But you have a potential to be so much more. I see that you can be a building block around which this whole kingdom of mine can be built. Not the cornerstone around which the temple is built, but the spiritual temple of Jesus, but a stone in that temple. Not the whole building. If it was the whole building, he wouldn't have used the word that means brick. He would have used the word that means foundation slab. He would have used petra, but he used petros. A distinction that's more relevant in Matthew 16:18, but this is John, so let's move ahead. You are Cephas, which is by interpretation a stone. So petros, anglicized Peter. That's where Peter comes from. His mama calls him Simon, but Jesus says, you're Peter. He will on occasion call him Simon, and usually when he does, there's some symbolic meaning there. You're backsliding, you're falling back, you're failing to live up to your potential, Simon, but that's for another time. 143. The day following, Jesus would go forth into Galilee, and he found Philip and said to him, follow me. This is, in John's record, the first time Jesus did the inviting. Jesus was just there when John the Baptizer said, look, here's the Messiah. And then immediately, Andrew and John start following him. And immediately thereafter, Andrew says, let me go get my brother. So Andrew goes to get Peter. And Peter is introduced to Jesus by Andrew. But here on this occasion, now it is Jesus taking the initiative. He goes and he finds Philip. Now I think it was always the plan of God. It was always the providence of God to bring these particular people together. That God and Jesus, essentially the same thing, wanted these 12 to be around Jesus, orbiting around Jesus, to be his leadership group of what would become his kingdom after he ascends into heaven. So I don't read so much into it. Well, Jesus went after Peter and Andrew's just tagging, or Philip and Andrew's just tagging along and Peter's just tagging along. No, I think providence is bringing these people together. It's just on this occasion here, Jesus is going to find Philip. But as we see, it doesn't stop there. Verse 44. Philip was of Bethsaida, the same city of Andrew and Peter, so they probably all know each other. They're all working the same job in the same town, not a big town, so they're all familiar with each other. A meeting of peers in a lot of ways. Verse 45. Philip, having been invited by Jesus, stops and runs the opposite direction, but not because he's callous or hard-hearted or doesn't love Jesus, because he appreciates the specialness of this moment and his evangelistic heart. This fisherman who has this natural inclination for evangelism and reaching out to people, I wonder why the Lord picks him, flees immediately to go find Nathanael. Verse 45. Philip finds Nathanael, also known as Bartholomew. So if you're singing the song and you wonder where is Nathanael, Bartholomew has one extra consonant, so his name is used in the song because that fits the song better than Nathanael, but it's the same guy. Nathanael is Chaldean, Bartholomew is Hebrew, same cat. Philip finds Nathanael and said to him, we have found him, of whom Moses and the law and the prophets did write. And he is Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And that he is. He is Jesus of Nazareth. He is Jesus. He is of Nazareth. And he is, in every legal sense of the word, the son of Joseph. Not biologically, but by law, by legal standing, Joseph is his father. Joseph, however, is nowhere to be seen in the book of John, because John begins with Jesus' ministry, essentially. So you don't get any reference to the birth, so there's no reference to Joseph. Presumably, he's dead. He's not on screen anymore. He's gone. But the description of him is particular here. And the key word to take away, which Nathanael's going to take away is of Nazareth. We have found him, the one of whom the prophets and Moses did write about, but Moses never gave you the name Jesus. The prophets never told you Nazareth, at least not in any way that you could specifically pinpoint. I know you can translate a certain word in Zechariah possibly as Nazar, Nazareth, Nazar, but that's like 3 lily pads you have to jump to get there, and none of these Jews, I think, were doing that, especially based on Philip's reaction. None of them were thinking Jesus. None of them were thinking of Nazareth. That's just the name his mama gave him by the direction of the angels, and that's just the town he happened to be grown up in. So he, however, that person is the embodiment of all these prophecies and all these predictions given by Moses and the prophets. He just happens to be a guy named Jesus from the town of Nazareth, whose son is Joseph the carpenter. Nathanael says to him, verse 46, "Can any good thing come out of Nazareth?" That's regional bias. It's just as normal as you would have it today. Can any good thing come out of Texas? You would think not. And you'd probably be right. I'm racking my brain. Can't think. None of y'all have said one. You're just laughing, so I'm taking it as a fact. So, regional bias. Can any good thing come out of Nazareth? Not that Nazareth was as bad as Texas. They didn't have a terrible reputation. It's just they were so small and insignificant that you would not think someone as important as the anointed one of God, the Son of God made flesh, which again, even that idea was foreign to them, but the idea that the long-expected Messiah that would be the ultimate Messiah, that he would come out of a middle-of-nowhere town in the north, not even in Judea, but up in Galilee. That's unfathomable. Of course, what they're not appreciating is Jesus was not born in Nazareth. He is of Nazareth because he was raised there, but he is from, ultimately, Bethlehem, and that is prophesied, Micah 5:2. But they're not, that's way too inside baseball for them. They're just thinking of, what do we know this guy from? We know him as the guy from Nazareth. Well, nothing good comes out of Nazareth. Nothing good has ever come out of Nazareth. Regional bias. Philip, however, having yet to see a single miracle, already senses there's something about this person, trusts his former rabbi, John the Baptizer, and has already pledged himself essentially to this new rabbi of his, Jesus. So he already has an inkling without having any facts on his side, without having any visual evidence yet, other than the word of the prophet, which is no small thing, but nothing that he has directly interacted with to make him say what he's about to say with such certainty that he says it, but still he says it, come and see. You see for yourself. Those 3 words imply there is something to see, that you don't have to just take it on blind faith, that you can step forward and see with your own eyes and witness what he can do, what he will do, not what he has done, because he has done nothing yet as far as these people know, and nothing compared to what he will do, which is the entire point he's going to make by the time we finish this chapter. But still, you can almost hear, you can almost feel the excitement in Philip when he goes to Nathanael and he says, "Oh, you come and see. You come see this person." 47. Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him, and he says, "Behold," my Bible says, "an Israelite indeed." Behold, the quintessential Israelite. Behold, a person who perfectly personifies the modern day man of Judea. Behold, an Israelite indeed. What do you mean by that? This person will shoot straight. This person will tell it like it is. If he says something, you never have to wonder, is he bluffing? You never have to wonder, is he blustering? You never have to wonder if he is completely, grossly misinformed. He has done his homework. He knows his deal. If he says it, you can take it to the bank. What a remarkable thing to say about this person who is just walking to you. They have had zero conversation. But Jesus is setting him up. Yes, sir.
So does that mean his comment about being from Nazareth was correct?
No, Jesus is setting him up for something that's about to happen. Although, I think you could also make that argument. That's also part of it too. Because Nathanael's point was, can any good thing come out of Nazareth? Because on the surface, it's such a small, insignificant thing, you would not think anything great would come out of it. But throughout the Bible, God has made that his go-to thing to use. Little as much when what? When God is in it, right? God loves using little things. God loves using insignificant things. God loves using things that are overlooked to do something amazing with. So yes, it is understandable why you would think something amazing would come out of Nazareth. But that's within the nature of God throughout the Bible. But in this case, it's more about setting him up. He is, and you'll see the payoff in a second, but nobody on the scene even knows what Jesus is doing. Why are you talking about this, Jesus? Why are you saying this? But still he says it. Here comes this guy. Whatever this guy says, he has no guile. You can take it to the bank. 48. Nathanael, rightly confused, says, where do you know me? We've never met before. I don't remember you, yet you act like you know me. You've just given everybody a very flattering biography of me. So how do we know each other? From whence do you know me? And Jesus said, before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you. When you were all by yourself, and not a single human eye was beholding you, I was beholding you. When you were all alone with just your thoughts, I was hearing those thoughts. When you were sitting alone and it was just you and God, it was you and me. When you were under the fig tree, words not chosen lightly, there was no one under that fig tree with him. Not until Philip came running up to him, and Jesus says, before that ever happened, I was there. I saw you. Divine insight, something which only a man of God could possess. So, Nathanael answered, verse 49, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. What has Jesus showed him? Nothing. He did not appear to him miraculously, just pop into view when he was under the fig tree. That would have been a remarkable spectacle that would have immediately made him say, here is a person of God. He didn't do that. He didn't send a big thundering, booming voice. He didn't send a still small voice like he did with Moses or like he does with Elijah. He doesn't speak to him in some ethereal way. He remains a human being, Jesus, but who uses that divine side of him to glean knowledge that no ordinary, no mere human being could have, and to know things and to see with divine sight. In fact, the word see here is eido, not blepo. Blepo is I see with my eyes. This word is eido, I perceive. I recognize in a way that goes beyond the limitations of the rods and cones. I perceived you. I knew you were there. I saw you. I could close my eyes and see you, in other words. That's something only God can do when you're all alone. So, of course, Nathanael understands what that means. You are what they say you are. If Philip had not come to him and said, we found the Messiah, we found the Christ, and then he has this conversation with Jesus without Philip, he probably would have said, who are you? Are you a prophet? They would have asked the same questions they asked about John earlier in this chapter. But because he's already been given the, here's who we're hearing this person is, added onto his divine insight, well, now you can put two and two together. You are what they say you are. You are the Christ. You are the Son of God. You are the King long expected, the King of Israel. Now, what he thinks that means and what Jesus will reveal that to mean are night and day. Because he's not coming to cut off heads and establish a new dynasty on earth. But King he is. 50. And Jesus said to him, because I said, I saw you under the fig tree, you believe? He says this not to scold him. He says there's almost humor in it. Is that all it takes? Because there's going to be a lot more hard-hearted people that's going to need a lot more than just that. But is that all it takes for you? Great. Good. But I got to tell you, Nathanael, you're going to see a lot more than that. You ain't seen nothing yet. If I can get your jimmies rustled by just saying, I saw you under the fig tree, just wait. You're going to see things that will blow your God-loving mind. Verse 51, he said to him, verily I say to you, hereafter you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. Somebody read Genesis 28, verses 10 through 14. Genesis 28, 10 through 14.
Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran, and he came to a certain place and stayed there that night, because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on earth, and the top of it reached heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. And in you, your offspring, shall all the families of the earth be blessed.
Most translations call it ladder, and that's why it's so famously known as Jacob's ladder. The word just means a stairway. It's more like a stairway. He saw a stairway ascending to heaven. And as Jacob is given this vision by God, he sees coming up and down from the domain of God to the domain of men, to the place where God gives his decrees, to the place where the angels do his work. He sees angels ascending and descending, going up and down, busying themselves. He's not like watching, like you're at a mall in the 80s and you're watching people just go up and down the escalator. He's watching angels do work. He's getting the invisible veil that separates our world from the spiritual world. The domain of God is pulled back. So he's able to just see the working of God on earth. He's able to see how God is in control, how he's sending angels here and there, to and fro, hither and yon, up and down, ascending and descending, off doing his gopher business work, as angels are called to do. And God is telling Jacob, and the voice of God he hears, same voice talking to Nathaniel, is you are my chosen one, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. You and your descendants will be as plenty as grains of sand on the earth, or as stars in the sky, as he says to Abraham earlier. And that your people will spread all over, and through your seed will all nations be blessed. There's two different things there. You have your descendants, your national brethren, your physical inheritance, the fellow Israelites, Jacobites that will come out of you, will be plenteous and numerous and spread over this land wherein you have trodden on your feet. That all this land will be yours and your people's. And your descendants, will go into Egypt, but I have made that promise, and so I will exodus them from Egypt, and I'll bring them back here. All that is there. All that's in their immediate future. And Moses, who's writing this, is setting up Exodus with that statement there. He's like, yeah, you're going to go in, but look, God made the promise to our father Jacob. We'll get out of Exodus. When they already have by the time they read it, and they see it all worked out. But there's that other side of it, though. But they didn't see that at the time, is that God says, through your seed. And the word seed, it's like deer or fish. It can be plural or singular. But you could also make it seeds, but you can also say your seed line. And it's a singular sounding word, but it can be spread plural. But it's particular, it's not a plural seed. It's not your descendants. It's not seeds, it's seed. One particular person from all those descendants. One will come. This is Galatians 3, and that being the Christ. So you will spread out your national descendants, your small regional descendants over this land. But from those descendants will come one. And this is what all I'm doing with these angels coming up and down is I've got a bigger plan. I'm sending angels to and fro doing my work. I've got a big picture plan here, and it will culminate in your seed creating a kingdom that will spread over the earth. Now, fast forward a long time later, and those words are being fulfilled right here. And Jesus is saying to Nathanael, all I did was tell you I saw you under a tree, and I blew your mind. Get with me, and for the next 3 years, you will see what Jacob saw as a vision come to reality. You will see the working of God, of angels coming and going, a nice little way to summarize God doing his work on earth. You will see that in a greater, more glorious, more specific way than Jacob ever saw it in a vision. You'll see God on earth doing the work that previously was of angels and much more than that. What a way to end the chapter. That's it. Are you already amazed? You ain't seen nothing yet. No. Baby, you ain't seen nothing. I'm not going to sing it. All right. Chapter 2. Yeah. Verse 1. So, we've had our big, long setup. And now it's time to do some miracles. Which you can argue, well, wasn't the vision, wasn't the insight under the fig tree a miracle? Yes. But it was a miracle in the way God always does miracles. It was just God's mind at work in knowing things. This is going to be not just some divine insight, which is a thing that cannot be tangibly seen or felt or understood. These are going to be real supernatural acts, deeds done that supersede and break the laws of nature, miracles. How we define the word, and it's so sloppy, but that's what the meaning of the word here is in John. The first of these 7 big miracles Jesus does in the book, turning water to wine. The third day, there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there, ... Third day. So the first day is John 1:29. Jesus says, here's the Christ, the Son of God. Andrew and John go and get Peter, bring him to Jesus. That all happens there. The second day begins in 1:43. Jesus meets Nathanael, because he texts where we started tonight. And the second day. Here's now the third day. There was a marriage ceremony, a wedding, spectacular extravaganza. It wasn't just one Saturday in the middle of football season. No, they're not even here. She's not here. I was looking at Sarah and Kate. It's not just one Saturday when Texas A&M and Arkansas are playing, but no, it's like a big long wedding celebration that they had back then. So in the middle of that, or toward the end of that, or maybe at the beginning of it, but they don't get there toward the end of it. We'll see why in a little bit. There's a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus is there. Verse 2. And both Jesus was called and his disciples to the marriage. And now I don't know if that means, if it has to mean, that when they sent the invitations, which they did not do on paper with stamps and notaries and things like that, to Jesus and his disciples. Because as we've already read, his disciples are 2 days old. And before that, they weren't his disciples. So I doubt that was already a thing. But it was Jesus and whoever is with Jesus is invited. Well, that happens to be his disciples, so they're called to. So they're all called to this marriage. Verse number 3. And when they, my Bible says, wanted wine, when they were with lack of, when they were in want of it, they had run out of it, the mother of Jesus said to him, they have no wine. Like, this is not Jesus' party. Jesus is not what the King James will call the governor of the feast. He's not hosting the thing. He's not the one getting married. He's not the best man. He is just a guy showing up. But Jesus, and this was the devotional tonight, Jesus' mother understood Jesus came to be a problem solver. But Jesus did not come to solve all your petty problems. Jesus did not set up a hospital. But everywhere Jesus went, he healed people. He healed people on his way to doing whatever he was going to do. And sometimes the means became the end. He would get so bombarded, he would just set up camp there for a while and start helping people in a small, menial way. We'll see that in chapter 6. But more often than not, it was Jesus trying to get from point A to point B and just being stopped a dozen times along the way, and his compassion being stirred within him, and just feeling this compulsion to just help people whenever he could help people. To the point where you read another text, people were being thrown at his feet because they were at their wits' end. They can't help this person. Medicine cannot help this person. Government cannot help this person. So maybe God can help this person. Well, of course God can. And Jesus' heart just swells, and he is compelled to want to help. Well, you can also see the other side of that, which is I've got a mission to do. I cannot constantly be bogged down doing every little thing, because what I came to do is bigger than your physical problem. So here comes Jesus' mother, and she says, we're out of wine. We need you to what? And the text doesn't say, and that was finally stated in the devotional tonight. We don't know what Mary's idea was. What did she think would happen? I don't think she expected him to turn water into wine. Jesus seems like he came up with that one. So I don't know what his mother thought. If he could just go and procure some way, or procure some in some supernatural way that she didn't know the particulars, or what. But she thought he would do something, is the point. Jesus' response, though, sounds in the English translation, at least mine, very pointed and sharp, but it doesn't need to be. But in my translation, it's, woman, what have I to do with you? My hour is not yet come. That sounds very testy. That sounds very short-tempered, but I don't think that's the meaning. My Bible says woman. Does he call his mother woman in your translation?
Yes.
Okay. Listen, if you ever go to my house, I grew up on a farm. I don't know if you know that. When I was a kid, and even now as an adult still, my mother, and we have a very unique relationship, me and my mother. And I call her my mother, which most people in the South, my mama, my mom, my mama. It's my mother, okay? My daddy, my mother. But when I'm talking and we're talking and so forth, I'll constantly call her woman. I'll say, woman, will you do the woman? And it's known between us as a term of affection, as a term of endearment, and anyone who doesn't know that would think it's very disrespectful. But it's not, because it's our word, so, butt up. Jesus here, when he calls his mother woman, that's not disrespect. The word means madam or ma'am. And if it's the opposite gender in your Bible, it would say sir. But I guess there was no word ma'am or madam that was used back then, so woman was used. And it was a term of endearment. It meant madam, ma'am. This is a sign of respect from a son to his mother. That's the end of that controversy. What have I to do with you? My hour is not yet come. A question and a statement. And they're linked together. And so they're meant to be understood in tandem. So you do yourself and you do the text no justice by trying to rip them apart and try to analyze them one at a time, because they're spoken bang bang. This is supposed to follow that. What have I to do with you? Very crudely, very inelegantly translated, and then my hour's not yet come. Pretty much all of our Bibles translate that one the same way. First half of the statement, woman, what have I to do with you? What does your Bible say there?
What does this have to do with me?
Yeah.
With me? Does anybody have an us?
What does this have to do with me?
Does anybody have the pronoun us here?
I did.
Your us, what does it say?
It says, what does that have to do with us?
Ah, see, that's better. That's closer. Because what he's saying, because this started because his mother came to him and said, they're out of wine. And the implied imperative there is, you need to do something about it. We are going to stand back and watch you do whatever you got to do, because the natives are getting restless, so you fix our problem. Jesus says, you're giving me a command to go do something. You're linking us together in what I'm about to do. And I need to make sure we are detached from this. This, what I'm about to do, has nothing to do with us. You're my mother, and I'm your son. But what I'm about to do is because I'm the son of God, not because I'm the son of Mary. So this has nothing to do, this is not an us thing. This is not Mary and Jesus got together and did the thing, and Jesus and Mary conspired together to do this thing, or Jesus and Mary concocted a plan to accomplish. No. You have nothing to do with this. My hour is not yet come. I have not yet revealed myself openly to everyone to start working these miracles. So I need to make sure people understand what I'm about to do is strictly for me to do. This is not an us thing. And that's built into the text. It just isn't translated that way in most of our Bibles. It becomes more like Jesus saying, what do I have to do with the wedding? As if Jesus isn't going to do anything. But you see why that's a bad translation, because he's about to do something. So like if Jesus said that and then didn't perform any miracles here, then we would teach that to mean, oh, well, Jesus has bigger fish to fry than to worry about little trivial things. And that's how we preach it. But that's not what happened. He does the miracle. So clearly we're not meant to take away from this that he's implying this is not for me to do. It is. It's just, it's not for me and you to work together to do. I'm going to handle this my way. You butt out. You completely get out of this. It has nothing to do with you anymore. Verse 5. His mother said to the servants, whatever he says to do, you do it. His mother understood the meaning of verse 4. His mother did not take it as a slight. His mother did not take it as, okay, we're in cahoots here, we're working together, let's just do it. No, she nopes out of there. She dips out. She turns to the servants and he says, he's in charge. Whatever he says, you go do. That does not put the servants on the same level as Jesus. They're called servants. That puts them as the guys who are doing the little dirty work while Jesus is doing whatever he's going to be doing. And what work are they doing? Not very much, seemingly. Verse 6. There were set there 6 water pots of stone, after the manner of purifying of the Jews, containing 2 or 3, my Bible says firkins, 9 gallons. So a firkin is 9 gallons, so 18 to 27 gallons. So big stone containers that were full of water, but not full to the brim, just with enough water that you could reach in, you could wash your hands, because you had to wash your hands ceremonially. And you had to wash your hands ceremonially 7 times to get the Pharisees off your back. We'll come back to that. Well, we won't, but in the other class they talk about that. Jesus and the Pharisees. So they had their washing pots there so they could wash their hands ceremonially and be clean in the eyes of the Pharisees to eat the food. But, we're late in the feast. We're late in the wedding. The water's, as almost empty as the wine is. So we got to refill the water. And Jesus says, fill the water pots. So the master says, fill. I'm going to fill it as much as I possibly can. You cannot get one more drop without overflowing. They fill the water pots, verse number 7, with water to the brim. Very important, because we know what Jesus is about to do. But let's think of it from a skeptic's perspective. He turned water into wine. Well, listen, there's a lot of ways a magician can make water into something else. Sleight of hand and the ability to add something to something and mix it together to make something else, not a complicated skill, okay? So you got a water pot that's, here's the brim, and here's the brim. And you fill it to like there. Look, you've got a lot of space to work with there. You've got that much space to work with, right? So you could take this water and you could add the must, M-U-S-T, which is what they call it. They squeeze and press the grapes together into a paste, put the paste in the clay jars, put the jars in the earth to keep them cool and safe. And then when it was time to make oinos, wine, they took it out, put it in the water, mixed together like Kool-Aid, and it became basically grape water juice. If you leave it out long enough, it ferments and it becomes the whole thing. But just the very notion of it, the nature of it is just sweet grape water. Because they didn't have Coca-Cola, so that's how they made sweet drinks to drink. And they didn't drink water. They didn't drink water because water was not, Dasani or whatever. So you would have to have, it wasn't purified, right? It wasn't clean. Which is weird because you use it to purify yourself, but that's the Pharisees. So you put the stuff in, mix it together to make wine, right? You can do more with it if you want to do more with it or whatever, but that's not the point. The point is these pots were filled to the brim. You can't add anything else to it. And the servants necessarily were there to see the pots completely filled to the brim with water. So there's no way, and they're here. There's no time when Jesus says, now you leave for 10 seconds and I'll watch the pots of water. No, he's not pulling a switcheroo. They're all here. It's all happening at the same time. It's all above board. They fill it up with water, and then we just cut. Did I skip the verse? Let me see. Verse 8. And he said to them, draw out now. So, bang, bang. Fill it up with water. And Jesus says, now take a sip. Draw out now and bear to the governor of the feast. So they take a cup and they bring it to the governor of the feast. The verse 9, ruler of the feast, governor of the feast. That's the guy in charge of the ceremony to make sure everything runs smoothly. When he had tasted the water that was made wine, boom, that's our first reference to what happened. We know it by heart because we've heard it 1,000 times, but if you're reading John for the first time, you don't know what's going on. All you know is Jesus said, fill up the water pots. Now, all of a sudden, John, the writer, just kind of subtly puts that in there. The water was made wine. When the ruler of the feast tasted the water that was made wine, and did not know where it came from, the servants which drew the water knew. The governor of the feast called the bridegroom. If you're at a wedding feast, you expect to have plenty of food and drink, and desserts, and little, Ritz crackers with sausages on them, all the things that you have, right? And when you run out, what a great faux pas. What a great failure on your part as the governor of the feast. So he's the one who's feeling the heat. He's the one who's in charge of this. He's the one now that knows it's too late to go get more. I just have to manage the crisis and take the heat. Now he drinks, we have wine, and we're about to see the best we've had all week. And so I need to go let the bridegroom know and almost accuse him of holding out on me and making me look like an idiot. Verse 10, he goes to the bridegroom and says, every man at the beginning, whenever there's a wedding, at the beginning of the long celebration feast, at the beginning you put out the good wine, the sweetest tasting wine, not the sour stuff. That's all you have left over. So we have to serve something, so we'll serve the sour stuff and the sour grapes. And you serve the sweet stuff. That's how it was. This is how it was back then. So every man at the beginning would serve the good wine. Then when everybody, my Bible says, have well drunk, they are not inebriated. I would hope 31 proverbs, almost all of which say something or another about the sinfulness of inebriation and drunkenness, would lead you to understand that clearly Jesus is not partaking in a celebration feast where everyone is getting stoned and hammered, okay? That's not what it means when they have filled themselves with all the food and drink there is. It's a big, long celebration. Everyone's there. The guy is saying, here's how it's supposed to be done. At the beginning of the celebration, you put out the best stuff. Then when everyone is full and everyone's tired and they're in a food coma, they don't care what the quality is because they're so stuffed. Then you put out the crackers that are stale. Then you put out the wine that's a little sour. That's that. Incidentally, on now we're 3 years later, when Jesus is on the cross and he says, I thirst, and they give him an antiseptic, not antiseptic, they give him an, what do you call it? Anesthetic. They give him an anesthetic. What do they actually give him on the cross? That's what your translation says, but what is it really? Do you know?
Sour wine.
Sour wine. That's so really, really sour wine, right? I swear, they shorten that bill every week. Anyway, you get the, yes, sir.
I wonder what the servant was thinking. He just saw water go into the dirty
Right.
ceremonial pot.
Right. He didn't taste it.
And he's taking some to the master of the ceremony.
Right. He has to have a lot of trust. He has to have a lot of trust in Jesus. But Mary has said, whatever he says, you do. So there's something about this person. So yeah, he's thinking this is either the greatest prank I'm about to witness or something remarkable is about to happen. And surely enough, it was the latter. So to finish his question, his curious statement, everyone at the beginning sets out the sweetest wine, the good wine. And then when everyone is full, let's put it that way, then you put out the worst stuff. But you have kept the good wine till now. You've waited until the feast is almost over, and now we're actually run out of this stuff, and you're bringing out the sweetest, best tasting wine that there is. And that's the end of the text. We don't get any, and then the governor met Jesus, and they had a photo op, and they cut a ribbon. We don't need that. Jesus just does his thing, lets the intrigue about it percolate, and then he's just gone. As we'll see in a minute, he's already preparing to make his way south into Jerusalem to do some amazing stuff down there. But he plants a seed, and he just lets it grow. And he heads to Jerusalem. He'll come back around to Nazareth and to Galilee. And by the time he comes back to Galilee, the buzz about Jesus will have swelled so much that he'll be known as this miracle man. So very fittingly, he does something here that kind of catches everyone's attention. So to finish the context, verse 11. This beginning of miracles did Jesus in Cana of Galilee, and manifested forth his glory. He revealed himself as the Christ King, and his disciples believed on him. What they saw, what they witnessed, what they knew in that immediate moment, I don't know. The text doesn't tell us. But one would assume the word that the head of the feast said would have been, the opinion would have been shared by all, because he made enough wine for everyone to enjoy. So everyone would have started saying, hey, why aren't they serving the best wine last? And then the word would have come out. Well, I'll tell you what happened. We ran out. And then Mary's son, Jesus, came. Jesus here of Nazareth, whom, I don't know if you've heard, John the Baptizer is saying is the Christ. Well, that sounds crazy. He's of Nazareth. I was there when he grew up. I saw him naked in the bathtub. I saw him running around in the dirt when he was a toddler. He's a human being. They all see him as a human being. But he has to be seen now as more than a human. And so he has to do these miracles to show he is a God-man, not just a man. And so the word starts to buzz. How did this happen? Well, this man just told us to fill up the water pots, and because he decreed it, it became wine. What did he do? How did he make it wine? What did he add? He didn't add anything. We filled the water to the brim, the servants will say. After Jesus is gone, in this isolated moment, his little evangelists, his little messengers of his good news will say, we filled it to the brim. He couldn't have added anything. And we were there the whole time to see nothing was added. It was just water, and then it just wasn't water anymore. Well, how does that happen? It cannot happen naturally. It can only happen supernaturally. Thus, it's a miracle. I'm going to stop here because I don't want to start the next half of John 2. We'll finish that next week. But I just want to take the last minute of class and really kind of put into your perspective what the word miracle means and how we use it here. Okay? By nature, which even just that opening statement is hard to put into phrase because God by nature is supernatural, right? But just by the idea of God being God, everything he does is supernatural. Even when God works within the confines of nature, providentially, the fact that God is interjecting himself to do that interjection is a supernatural act. But that does not mean you should therefore say, everything God does is a miracle. Because when you do it, when you say that way, you water down the meaning of the word miracle. Never in the Old Testament, when God does things, is the word miracle used. You'll get the word like wonder or sign. Wonder is the reaction of people. Sign is the result of the miracle to the people. It gives them a roadmap to something bigger than what they're seeing with their eyes. But when God's voice is booming and thundering and lightning from Mount Sinai, that's not just a storm happened to roll over and God said, hey, great opportunity to talk to Moses. No, God conjured that storm. God stirred up the atmosphere to make that storm at Mount Sinai. So that's a supernatural act. But we would not water down the word miracle by saying that's a miracle. Because a miracle is when someone who cannot do something supernatural accomplishes something supernatural. When people who are constrained by nature are able to break through those constraints, that's when you use the word miracle. So in that sense, everything God does is supernatural, but the miracles of Jesus are those specific times when he, as this seemingly man person, breaks the confines of nature and does something that cannot be done. Because you can't naturally walk on water. But Jesus can manipulate the surface tension of the water to make him walk on it. He can do something supernatural. You can't take water and just make it be something else, whether it's wine or Kool-Aid or chocolate milk. But Jesus, without adding, touching, doing, breathing, speaking, anything, he can just make it be something else. Just with a thought. He can turn it into something else. That's a supernatural act. 7 of those are recorded in John, which point to this man being more than a man. This was the first. We'll get the next one in chapter 4. Between then and there, some speeches that he gives. That's all I have for you all. Thanks.